everybody. Welcome to Certified Life Coach Institute, CLCI Live.
Don't mind me, I'm just trying to get my art to show, but it's not
Brooke
working.
is trying to look for some television to watch, and she should be ashamed and feel guilty.
CLCI bores her so much that she needs to find a show.
Yep, that's how it is. Just so you
You
know.
just literally just put on anything, Brooke. It's fine. You could even turn the TV off. You know, that might be a simpler solution.
Oh,
It'll itself in a second. I'm trying to get.
Okay. We're just gonna leave it on the menu, like kind of in between.
Oh
It's not. It's just. I'm gonna murder you.
Uh-oh, a live threat. Uh-oh.
Apparently not.
Probably not the first death threat that was issued to me on one of these lives.
Probably not. No. What does that say about you?
And she's still trying.
I'm gonna just turn off my camera and then it come back when I'm ready. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Yes, we have fun like this practically every day.
So I'll be right back because I'm having a genuine computer issue now. So.
Okay.
Yes.
Anthony, what did you just do air quotes to?
Genuine computer issue, whatever else she was saying. I was just being a nuisance. All right, so we were talking about self-sabotage 101. Last week, and Jen's frozen now too. This is going great, everyone.
Well, at least she's smiling.
That's true. She's smiling. Oh, normal now and not smiling. Last week on Self-Sabotage 101, we talked about being afraid of success. This week, we are talking about guilt and shame. And before we continue, you should like, subscribe, share, comment, interact with us wherever we're streaming. We will be monitoring the comments and we want to answer your questions. So be sure to do that. Guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? Why do we make a distinction? What is the difference between guilt and shame to you guys? Hello, Frank Cobble. Nice to see you too. We got one person interacting with us.
So I like guilt. Guilt is I've done something wrong, and shame is something is wrong with me, right? So shame is almost like an identity emotion. You're attaching your identity to it.
Yeah, when it comes to shame, it's a space that's really difficult to move out of, sometimes impossible to. With guilt, it's a good first step, usually something that's required when it comes to healing, when you've done something that you disagree with personally.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa?
I'm typing. Please comment, like, and share.
Gotcha. Yeah, guilt. And so, Jen, to sort of touch on what you were saying, guilt is I've done something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Shame is, and joy and success says, is shame a secondary emotion? I don't know. It could be it's my primary emotion. I feel shame most of the time. I'm sure
shame.
There's probably an actual difference between primary and secondary emotions, but I will say probably shame is a primary emotion or a feeling for most people's life. And when we say emotion, that's probably the actual difference between shame and guilt, where I could be guilty of something, but I don't feel shame about it. Guilt is more of like a fact. Frank was feeling guilty about his day, and then he got on this. Yes, if you don't watch CLCI Live, you should feel guilty and ashamed.
Yep.
What did I do? What did I just put back into? Ooh, how can I hear myself?
Yeah,
I'm looking up what typically comes in under secondary emotions. And what it says, it talks about being angry, frustrated, irritation, withdrawal, anxiety, and fear. So I would think shame is a main reaction, a main go-to, because when one is in shame, that withdrawal adds to all of those other frustrations or irritations or etc.
Now we just can't hear.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
yeah.
Mike was working, and then
You're muted, Brooke. That's why.
I'm muted.
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. I can hear myself twice. So some,
whoa, there was two
Whoa.
Brooks for a
I
second.
know.
Well, they're working on that. I'm gonna.
Are you
keep-
logged in a different like restream? Oh, she's gone.
Yeah.
Okay, so guilt and she's
I think I
back.
fixed it.
Okay, Brooke, what is the difference between guilt and shame? We were just talking about that.
Did you guys talk? Have you shared? Do you know?
We did. We do.
Yeah.
What did you say?
I want to see if you know.
Well, the difference between guilt and shame is simply shame or guilt. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad.
I think Brene Brown has been really amazing with identifying those different concepts. I think they were in the history very well confused.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are often in our vernacular.
But like
Makes
shame and guilt, though, they're kind of like almost always jumbled up, because you could say something like, I did something bad because I am bad, and I am bad because I did something bad. So oftentimes they're very, very intermingled.
I think that the big difference, though, one of the big things to think of is there's an external influence and a sense of responsibility, where like an ownership. So
Associated with what?
So when you feel guilt, you did something. So you have to take, essentially, there's a certain action, right? There's a certain something that you can pinpoint and say, I did this. Shame is I am this. Like it's much like less productive and far deeper emotion. It definitely, I would think that, yeah, they can lead to one another. Like they can and there you can go from healthy guilt to unhealthy guilt to shame, right?
Is that I sort of have a contention with that. Can shame be productive?
Yes, I think so.
They say it is.
It can be, but I don't think
it serves a purpose
I
to
don't-
allow us where Brooke was identifying are the different forms of that shame that fall into unproductive to productive, I guess I would call that.
So I like to use shame as an indicator that I'm out of alignment or out of integrity. So if I feel shame about something, I get curious about it and try to see why, because typically there's something that I'm not okay with myself on my own behavior. So I like shame. I didn't used to, but now if it comes up, I'm like, ooh, what's here for me?
But are you confusing shame for guilt is my question, because if you're saying it's related to a specific incident or a specific something, that to me says guilt. I could see how like a shame. So if I'm like beating myself up and I'm saying I'm stupid, I don't blah, but all these things, that is shame. But then I guess that could say, okay, why am I beating myself up? Well, there's a specific incident that happened. How was my behavior in this incident, right? And then that is sort of when you can sort of start to analyze it. But I think it brings it back to guilt at the end, right? It's sort of a
Yeah,
Both-
I would agree with that because
Both are useful.
yeah.
There's a really good infographic that I'll share right now that
I know, I love that graphic. That was very
Clarify.
cool.
this a bit. I'm a little jumbled up right now because I had technical difficulties. So I'm trying to get back to. There we go. So I popped it in there, and this sort of takes you. This infographic takes you through the moving how helpful guilt can present, how unhelpful guilt can present, and then how shame can present in the same situation, sort of, or well, not even the same. So worth a peruse, great tool for sure. So where are we? We the difference between. Do we need to talk about the difference between?
I feel like we've established it enough for this conversation.
For now.
Okie dokie. So what do you think the difference between helpful and unhelpful is? How do you define that?
To me, unhelpful is remaining in victimness. Helpful means I have empathy and have the ability to make changes.
So I have a question. How are you being a victim when you're being in shame?
I'm buying into that I am not good. I am bad.
What am I a victim of?
Myself.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment when you're experiencing shame, do you feel like a victim of your own state of being, essentially?
No.
That might be the case, but I don't know if the person who feels shame identifies themselves as a victim. They
I
might
probably
just think
not
they're
in the moment.
inadequate.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain standard of personhood that I should be this way, but I'm not this way, and I'm ashamed for the person that I am. And it might be helpful to like where it becomes helpful or not is what they do with that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm gonna be proactive in achieving the standard, whether it's a realistic standard or not, if I'm going to be proactive in sort of achieving that standard so that I am the person I would like to be, then it's helpful shame. Where it's not helpful is where it's just like I'm not even good enough to begin trying to fix myself.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe realizing that I don't need to be fixed. But when you're not doing anything with the shame and you're just that's the way it is, then it's not helpful. You're not going anywhere with it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any times that you all have experienced shame?
Yeah.
Never.
Let's get vulnerable, folks. When do you feel ashamed?
I can go.
Okay.
I always have a shame story ready. So my brother is a photographer and he upgraded his camera and he gave me his old camera, and it's a beautiful camera, expensive camera. And I took it on a trip and I somehow lost it in going through security.
Oh no.
And at least that's what I thought. Turns out I had left it in the rental car. So once I realized that I had lost this camera that I didn't even use on the trip, it was like, you're a horrible freaking person. How could you do this? I mean, this is just terrible. There's no excuse for this. You always do stuff like this, Jen.
Oh.
You are just, you're never going to learn.
Yeah.
Brutal. Just brutal.
Unhelpful shit.
So
Yeah.
the story though is a good ending because we called the rental car company and someone turned the camera in. A good Samaritan turned the camera in. So I got it back. And yeah. But here's the key. I've never to this day used the camera. So I still have some sort of guilt about I'm not using this camera that he gave me. I should be using it. It's valuable and it's a great camera.
Well, you wouldn't. I mean, if we can go into. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you're probably not using it. Let's be honest here.
Okay, unravel that.
Probably not that you would be putting yourself up for.
Yeah. So shame was the original. It immediately went to there's something wrong with me. You're bad. Not what you did was bad. There was no mercy or grace at all for that being a genuine mistake. It was immediately like, this is your pattern. You're a forgetful person. You're irresponsible. You know, it was very much so identity statements. And now it's more just like, well, you should probably find a way to use that camera, Jen.
It's funny, like having ADHD, I'm so used to like leaving things in place. Like that is like symptom number one of many. And mind you, a lot of shame is accompanied with ADHD because of the symptoms that we have. but I leave stuff, and so I just a long time ago just went, yeah, that's just part of who I am. Like I just leave stuff places, and I just have had to accept it. And built-in things, I think Jenna's frozen like watches that can find things for me, and having everything with a tag on it, or I mean, definitely building tools, but that's a total side effect of ADHD, or a symptom of ADHD, is leaving things places. So I was talking to somebody about that the other day, and she left her phone in the studio, and she ran back to get it. And she was like, I can't believe I did that. She was beating herself up. And I was like, I just did that the other day at a studio. They left. I had to use the place's next door's phone to call them to come back to unlock the studio because I had no way to drive home. I'm like, this is my life.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Probably should have more shame around that,
but you know what I just realized? I didn't share the most important part of my shame story. I actually took a piece of paper and I wrote down all of those, you're irresponsible, you always do this, you're a horrible person. And then one by one, I shifted them into something that was more truthful. And it really, really lifted a lot of the shame. I still didn't feel good about the experience, but I no longer was like berating myself, So a tool.
Do you still berate yourself over things?
No, no, that's the old version of me.
Yeah.
Now I'm much softer with myself, much more, gentle, and like I'm in coach brain with myself. I coach myself rather than trying to beat myself into submission. That doesn't work.
If I'm irritated with myself, like I've left my phone. I mean, I work out of my home. There's not very many places it could go, but I'm really irritated. Do you think? And I'm irritated with myself. So that must be shame as well.
Is irritation shame? Is
myself names about it?
Well, hold on. Like, if you were irritated that someone else was doing this with your things, like let's say a family member was just leaving your phone, would your irritation mean that you're shaming them? Like,
It could. I don't typically do that, but it could.
I have a question. What do you say to yourself once you find the phone?
I start swearing. Where did I leave that thing? I know it's around here.
No, but once you find it, though, like once you recover the phone, once you locate,
I'm like, of course it's here. That's where it was.
But you don't beat yourself up after that at that point, or anything.
Not after that. Not once I find it. It's one of those things. It's all. I get annoyed, but you're right, or frustrated with myself. Like, okay, your life would be easier if you just took a couple steps to make your life easier. So why don't you do that? I don't know if it's full blown shame. I can say, like, in a moment recently where I felt like a little shy and embarrassed and like shame. But it wasn't too much, but it's enough. It's enough, right? And it was in one of my trainings for Pilates. It was one of the tougher weekends. And I got called up to demonstrate a move. And I had a hell of a time demonstrating that move. And everybody's like got their hands on me and they're moving me and they're like trying to tell me what to do. And I'm trying to be, getting all this stuff. And it felt like in that moment, like I just kind of, I think it was a combination of being in front of everybody and then not being able to do it and ultimately not being capable of doing it. And just feeling like that whole weekend was kind of grind physically, like with things that were really hard to do. And I just remember coming away from that weekend feeling like I'm not going to be able to, there's no way I'm not going to be able to do these. There's just some things I'm just never going to be able to do. I'm never going to be good enough. My body's not going to be capable. I'm not built that way. My knees, that's something I sometimes get frustrated with and probably get a little, because my knee's been replaced. Like there are things like I don't like about the fact that is part of me, and I just have to sort of accept it. And I think sometimes I get like, man, I wish it wasn't like that.
I wish I was, and I think I do beat myself up once in a while for not, having a normal knee and not being able to do some things. And then in that moment too, I just remember coming away from that feeling kind of broken down. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, if I want to keep doing this because it's hard and I'm frustrated and I don't feel good enough. And like I'm capable where other people are, because there's other people that just hop up and did it. And I was like, man. But
Yeah.
I think what I did with that was I built it into when I'm teaching Pilates, making sure it's a super accepting space where like everybody in that space, I address it every class. Everybody's in a different spot. Everybody's got, and it's really cool when you can't do something because it means that you have a milestone. It means that you have something to work towards. And if you can come in and do everything, then I mean, you wouldn't want to do it. This gives you a chance to like build and grow. And in a month when you're able to do it, or 2 months, we'll celebrate. And that's the try to window. This other place, it didn't feel like that. It felt like judgment, and I didn't like it. Yeah, so yeah.
And I would say that shame is a product of the awareness of guilt, eventually leaving us feeling worthless. I've got a weird interpretation of feeling worthless. Is it a bad thing to feel worthless, like inherently, or when you feel bad about being worthless, that is shame?
Yeah, I think when you feel bad about being worthless, it is shame. Because I don't know that I'm worthy of, like, I don't know, worthy, that's going to get philosophical. Like, when somebody says to me, you deserve that, I, like, rebel against it because I'm like, I don't think anybody deserves anything. I think that we create situations, or, you know what I mean, in which we have expectations or what have you, but ultimately, I don't like the idea of, because I did X, Y, and Z, I deserve X, or I deserve, whatever. I don't love that setup for some reason. And so that's what, in the same thing, when you feel worthless, I get the same kind of feeling from that. Like, well, when am I worthy? And who decides that? And what decides that?
That's a good coaching question. Especially when the client will bring up that sort of talk where I don't really buy into the idea of self-worth, but if my client mentioned it and feelings that we're talking about, their feelings of shame like that, it might not be a good idea as a coach to just say, no, like, you are worthy, like, you are worth something. You shouldn't feel ashamed about that, because then we're just unloading our own beliefs. A good question might be, okay, so when do you feel worthy? When do you feel adequate or worth something? Or, I guess, what are the other opposite feelings of shame? Not flawed. Things like that. And then asking into those questions might be a more coaching approach. But this is also like I feel like we're straddling the line of coaching and therapy.
I'm not getting that yet. I mean, I know that line can often be a straddle, but I think the ability to listen to what the client says, to listen to what their beliefs, to ask questions around.
I think I more so mean like when the issue itself is we're working on my shame, my self-shame, and my self-guilt, and being stuck in that sort of thought process, that seems to be like therapy territory. But when we're working towards a goal and the roadblock is showing itself and presenting itself as shame or guilt, how does that sort of come up in a coaching session? Like, what are the signs that a coach should look out for that, like, oh, this is someone's shame that's sort of stopping them from getting to their goal?
I usually see that the client is making someone else.
Jen is frozen.
Oh, Jen. I'm telling you, she has an update. I'm telling you. I just had to do 2, and that was my technical difficulty issue. So.
Well, can someone else answer the question? Oh, Jen's back. Jen,
Back?
Yeah, she's
answer
back.
quick.
Okay, what did you hear?
Oh,
Oh,
she's gone again.
got
Oh,
it.
she's just gone.
Fully gone.
I had forgotten your question, Anthony.
What was your question?
So when my question was, when the coaching subject itself is not shame or guilt, it's some other goal or project, how does shame and guilt come up in a coaching session and self-sabotage the client's success?
Should I try to speak?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I notice when the client is making someone or something else the authority of their worthiness, of their value, of however their scale of worthiness or value is. And so I usually ask into that just to simply bring awareness to that, because the client might want to be the ultimate authority on their worth at the end of the day. And when they realize they're giving that responsibility to someone else, typically that can shift naturally if they're ready to shift that.
What if there is a case where someone else is the authority or the responsibility of determining their worth?
So
like if they're trying to get, like a job, like I'm trying to get a job or I'm trying to get a promotion, and my client is dealing with a superior who is literally gauging their worth to the company, and feelings of shame come up.
Yeah, focusing on what they have control over, focusing on how they think and feel about their own performance. I mean, that's all they have control over.
It's hard sometimes to do that, though, because I'm thinking of a moment that I was complaining about today. When you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting, and something didn't turn out the way you expected, but you're waiting for the reply based on what you've shared with them. It can go into, it's not guilt, it's shame, not being good enough, not, for a while I bought into it for a little bit until I did something about it, and that's when it shifted. So I think when a client doesn't follow through with something that they really want and allows them to make that the priority versus themselves, which is real similar to what you just said, Jen, and not a huge deviation from what you said. No.
I have a feeling that this comes up a lot in couples coaching.
Well, yeah, I would guess. Yeah. Well, that's some of the things I was thinking of too. It is one of those things where I have to check even myself at times, where like when I want something from somebody else, like I want an external validation, I will have moments where I have to go, okay, wait, Brooke, instead of requiring somebody else to do that for you, how can you do that for yourself? Like, and that it's something that has become much more natural for me, like learning how to meet my own needs. But like, there are definitely moments where as a people pleaser, my natural inclination is to seek out that external validation, and then I have to go or support, and then I have to pump the brakes for a moment and go, okay, wait, Brooke, how can you do that for yourself? The weird line I have there is at what point is it okay, I'm asking for help and I'm being and at what point am I just like have I become such an independent human being that I need nobody else? Like, because there's like a weird line to walk, right? So where guilt and shame falls in there, I'm not sure, but how we asked the guilt question or shame question. Is there can you guys think of times you felt guilty?
Oh, no one else shared a shame story.
I know,
Well,
just you and I.
There was the felony that I committed.
You're full of malarkey.
Oh my goodness.
So
Anthony, seriously.
Guilt seems like a bit sort of easy. It's easier for me to wrap my head around than shame, because I have difficulty with emotions anyways. But guilt, you just do something right or wrong. Your actions or inactions lead to consequences that are not favorable, and you were responsible for them. So I'm trying to think of like examples where I've like done something and felt guilty.
For me, here I am, just like, oh, I've just got things just popping up in my head, right? Left and right. Like I'm like, oh, and then I felt shame about this. I felt guilt about this. And Anthony's racking his brain trying to find one example.
I know it's tough for me to be self-reflective. Let's see.
I think there's one that we can all maybe agree with, and I mean not just us here, but most people on planet Earth. We're guilty when we kind of overindulge. Maybe when you go out to eat, specifically eating. I'm talking about when you go out to eat, and instead of ordering that half bag of shrimp and potatoes, you get the pound.
Frank actually, he brings up a good example that our students go through. I'll be honest, I've got some guilt that I've been through the master's class, and I haven't done any advertising for clients. I see this a lot with people I coach with, but also like myself. Like I should be doing something and I'm not doing it. And my inaction has led to consequences, and I'm guilty of that, which could very easily cross over into shame, but we'll stick with guilt for now. I should be doing something and I am not doing it. I should write more fiction. I should go running more often because it will lead to things that are good for me, and then I don't do it, and that's bad. However, I don't know if I'm so wrapped up in the shame part where I feel like a bad person because of it, but I do recognize that it does lead to problems when I don't do things I originally set out to do.
But what happens if it doesn't lead to problems?
Yeah.
If it doesn't lead to problems, then I probably don't feel guilt about it. But obviously, my lack of exercise has led to problems.
So consequences are directly tied to your sense of guilt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not even just like external consequences, like I get called out on it, but you only are able to reflect that something bad has happened that you're responsible for unless there's consequences. I'm speaking for myself. I'm sure there are people who feel guilt over things that they have no reason to feel guilty about, and they bear no actual responsibility for. Like I was coaching someone, and I'm trying to be less specific so I don't, give away their info, who felt guilty that they were spending so much time on their business that maybe they weren't paying attention to their partner. Mm-hmm. And I investigated a bit further. Their partner made no objections and has not complained to them. Mm-hmm. Yet they've created a situation where they feel guilt about something that hasn't really had consequences. Mm-hmm. They just felt guilty about spending time doing other things. And we had to talk about that, and I had to sort of dig as to where this actually caused a problem, and they didn't really have answers for me, and that kind of helped alleviate the guilt.
I think a lot of times people will start overthinking, like you're describing there, overthinking on what they think the other person is doing or going through, or expectations, because that's what they would go through typically, right? That's what they would experience had that been in reverse. So a lot of the times when people come up with those kinds of conundrums, many times they have gone through that themselves. Maybe they don't remember. And like we said, we're not digging in the history of, but helping that person have an understanding of who they are and where they want to go from this, and how does it help them when they didn't even have the conversation with their friend. They don't even know that their friend is thinking this. Where is that? How is that serving them? How is that helping them in that moment to connect? Usually it has something to do with not connecting.
Mm-hmm. So, the book, The Big Leap. Have you heard of this book?
Maybe.
The Big Leap? Yeah.
So The Big Leap, in that book, the concept of guilt is presented as the upper limit of your thermostat that you're programmed with from early childhood of what you're worthy of or what you are deserving of. Mm-hmm. And when you start to hit that upper limit, guilt will kick in and you'll drop yourself back down into your comfortable range. What do you guys think about that?
I have heard of these kind of things before. Well, so you're feeling guilty when you're being successful, essentially, and so you.
Jen's gone.
She's
I know.
frozen. Jeez. There she
Yeah.
is.
Oh, she's not
Guilty when you're. Yes.
I'm trying to think of a time I felt guilty for success.
I have one where I felt a little guilty for success, although I had nothing to. It's not responsible, so this is guilt without responsibility. One time, go to shoot a commercial with a couple of friends of mine for my old job, and as we're walking out to the shoot, friend twists his ankle, can't do the shoot, and the director needs somebody else to step in his place. I'd volunteer, step in, and accidentally make a lot of money when none of the other people did.
Accidentally made it.
So
Definitely.
no, yeah, you're right. It's from skill and my professional nature. No, it was pure luck, but luck essentially meant one person did not get paid at all, really. The other people did not get paid as much, and I got paid a lot of money for essentially something that was out of sheer coincidence.
Was it pure luck though?
Thanks for the coaching question, Brooke. No, it wasn't pure luck because I volunteered. However, it was pure luck because, also it's not pure luck because the other guy was a klutz. There's a lot of ways you can justify luck to not appear as luck, but essentially, to me, it was luck. I just had the opportunity to volunteer, and for an opportunity I didn't know was going to be an opportunity.
And you could be there, and you showed up on time, and you were capable of filling the role, and there was a lot of things that you did that you're not giving yourself credit for. Just saying.
Yeah. So what do you get?
Now you're not coaching at that point.
Well, no, that is not coaching, but
I don't know if I'm in the thing or not. I can't tell if I'm in or out. Am I
yeah,
in?
you're
You're
in.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're in.
What do you get from choosing to believe that it was luck?
It gets rid of responsibility. It gets
what
rid
does
of
that do?
personal responsibility and the responsibility of all the other factors, because it just gets me to stop thinking about it. Because then you can work yourself into this whole justifying, like, well, maybe it was because I was a great actor. Maybe it was because my friend was a klutz. Maybe it was because of all these other factors. They don't matter. Those factors don't actually matter. If I just say that it was luck, I can deal with this guilt that I felt and just move on with my life.
What makes you think you being a great actor doesn't matter?
Because that's probably not what was the case. Well, it literally wasn't the case. I looked into the reasons why I made what I made. Nothing to do with my acting skill. It was just the being in the right place at the right time while the camera was rolling. That's it. And then later I got confirmed that I wasn't so good of an actor when I tried to do other acting roles in commercial, but that's besides the point. The fact is, saying that it was a lot is a way to just mentally get over the hurdle of trying to figure out why some things happened, why other things didn't happen, and just accept that they happened and then moving on. So it might be a way of dealing with the guilt. I don't feel guilty about it anymore, but I felt a little bit guilty when I was younger and when it happened. And having my friends also be aware that it happened. I don't know. That's my story of how I made money in a commercial.
And you felt guilty about it.
And I felt a little bit guilty, but after realizing that it was just sheer coincidence, or telling myself it was sheer coincidence, feel better now about it.
Do you guys think that time and age kind of heals all guilt?
No,
No.
absolutely not.
No, I think that you have to work at it. I think it's something that you have to. I mean, I think that it's not. I think we naturally fall into feeling. And you can just kick my butt and tell me I'm wrong, but I'm just gonna expound for a moment. Bye, Anthony. I think that we have naturally built into us a sense of guilt and shame, right? And I think it can be at varying levels depending on how we're raised, depending on what we experience as a kid, what happens with regard to being, if you're super bullied, or it can turn that dial up, but it's built into us, I think, as an evolutionary construct, as something that helps us, assist us in learning, and assists us in essentially being social creatures and being able to exist in a social environment in which there is expectation. And when you say you're going to do something, you follow through, and we're not manipulating one another. I think it's built in for our success. But I think, as we do with a lot of things, we let them run out of control, right? And we let that negative brain kick in. We let that negative, our tendency as people to fixate on negative. They say for every one positive thing, there are five. There are five negatives, right? Or it takes five positive things to
There it is.
circumvent one negative thing. So we are so hardwired to fixate on the negative, and so I think what we end up doing is allowing it to eventually become instead of a tool that assists us in changing, a tool of self-sabotage, a tool that it ends up running rampant. And when that happens, we have to come to a point at some time of awareness around it. And I think that's work. I think that it's work for us to break these habits that are just sort of innately ingrained in us, for us to practice being happy human beings and peaceful, zen, stress-free human beings. I think it would be unfair for us not to address that there has to be some work done for that to happen. And it's an ongoing process. It gets easier, right? You get better at rolling with the punches and letting go of things and stuff. But it definitely is something, I think, that you have to consciously make an effort to change.
So I have a question about what you're saying.
Yeah.
When does working on guilt and shame become something a coach considers referring out to a therapist? I mean, when is it too much for it to remain in the coaching space?
Good question. Because if we're just living in the past, right, that's not our space, right? If it's something that's coming up in the work that we're doing moving forward, I think that we're in the all clear. I think when it starts to be a complex, when it starts to and Lisa, you can confirm with me on this, but when it starts to really get in that space of it's just always, this happened, this is the past, I'm beating myself up, and we're no longer in an 80-20 space, right? We're our 80s swinging towards the past the whole time, and our 20s talking about what we're doing and what our forward momentum. That is the point that I'd say, okay, you need therapy, and you got to get past this past stuff, and figure out, put that to bed essentially, or we can work together, a therapist, and we just have to table it and say, hey, this is really getting into that space of we're really dwelling in the past, and you can't coach the ghost, right? So.
Well, I would say it could even be a current situation as well. It doesn't have to be just the past. It's a situation that the client is, and I'm going to use the word loosely is where I'm going. So incapable of making the adjustment to change that behavior. They keep revisiting it, right? So it could still be current, which is just still going along in the lines of what you're saying, Brooke. And so I call it, if we just keep hitting that door and the client can't make any changes, I would say a few times, then that becomes probably a good time to refer out, along with adjusting for the history if they can't get past something that happened in the history. In the sense of that they are saying they want to, that does also become a therapy direction as well. Oh, I thought Jen was talking. She's
I truly I think that there's just a knowing that comes when you're working with somebody. I think, and maybe we're spoiled a little bit because I don't know, maybe I've been spoiled because the people I've worked with, I haven't really had too much of oh my God, I gotta refer this person out. that hasn't come up too
Yeah.
often. I know Sam has had a few of those moments, and I wish he was here to talk more about that. But I think there's a knowing that happens if you have your training, right, and you have what the difference between moving forward is and removing a block and exploring for the sake of moving a block. And I think Dan said something kind of brilliant today too, and not that he does all the time, but where he was talking about a client who was talking about something in the past, and that coach was asking around the past, like why, asking that why question. And he brought up, well, why don't you, instead of exploring the why, because that's like the basis level, why we did something in the past, we can't do anything about that, right? So it's like the lowest level for when you want to grow. We want growth. We have to move out of that base level. And so instead asking them to create a situation in which it was different, right? How moving forward, how do you want it to be different in the future? How do you want it to be different when this happens again? How do you want to behave differently? How do you want the outcome, your behavior, your reaction, and whatever it may be, to be different? And what do you want to create? And what kind of situation do you want to create when something like that happens again? There's such a more productive and forward-moving questioning that happens that's about creativity and growth and change. That is where coaching really is, where the difference between why did that have the past, which is really, you can't do anything about that, right? So that's the power of that exploration of bringing it to the future, the present and the future, and how that's such a bigger space for growth and creation and creativity.
Another thing that Dan says is bringing it into the present. What does it mean for our conversation today? How is it showing up for you today, right? Bringing whatever it is into present and asking into it from that space.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times, coaches, especially newer coaches, think they have to know what it is, what it was about, and you don't need to know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have any impact. And that's kind of the difference. A lot of the times, when you're with your friends, you go, oh, what happened? Where that, you're going to dig into the things with your friends, but in coaching, you don't need to. There's, I'm trying to think of this author, and I say the name incorrectly. This is not his name, but it's something similar. Horrible Henry. He basically said, he would tell them, I don't care about your history. We're working here and now. We're going to go forward. He wasn't so nice about it, but that's the idea. We don't need to know that story unless it's impactful for the client to reiterate it yet again. And most of the time, I would go 99% of the time, it is not beneficial for that client to go relive all that history stuff.
And this is that moment too when you are the coach are allowed to go pump the brakes here. Hey, we're delving and let's talk about, this is not what we're here to work on, essentially. Yeah. A big question, and this sort of refers to that, when the client continues to refer back to their past, is this a good time to refer back to what coaching is and coaching isn't? Sure. I think so, yes. I think that you can also do what Jen and I just mentioned as well, and Lisa, which is to do that exploration of, well, how do you want it to be different in the future? What it is. And that's that reframe. That's being able to remove those blocks and change the perspective and where some powerful work can happen. I think that the big red flag blink moment is and I think if you're explaining what coaching is and coaching isn't, could get a little lectury and judgy, and I think that you can find a way. You can find a way to do that by bringing it to the present, bringing it to what you're working on, setting that contract and referring back to it, and doing it in those ways so that it doesn't feel preachy or judgy. But I think this is it's an opportunity when handled right for a coach to do some really powerful work with a client, but it is a narrow path you're walking, right? And I think you can really tell when that client doesn't want to bring it to the future, when that client doesn't want to make it better, when that client doesn't want to reframe, when that client wants to stay in the pain, in the victim, in the guilt, in the shame, and they're refusing to change that, that's a refer moment right there, right? Like when they're just like, nope.
Which is different than when the client, it's to their benefit that they want to share with you this information. And then you keep it going in that forward pace. You're not going to go back into reviewing the details of what they share with you. Someone's staying stuck. They don't want to get out of that. They want to stay in whatever that hood is. Then that probably is a good place for them to get referred out.
And I know we've only got a little time. This is a great question. It's not necessarily related to guilt and shame. I'm going to say there's a couple answers to this question. It's always good to have some great people you can refer to. Don't be brokenhearted if they go, I will find my own, right? Which is just as good. If there are situations in which you have a partnership with a therapist, there are ways you can work actually with therapists so you can stay coaching that client at the same time, and you have to create a symbiotic kind of relationship for that to happen. And so having some therapists that you can work with and trust and refer back and forth to one another is a fantastic tool. Yeah. But also remember, nobody likes a good idea better than the only thing somebody likes better than a good idea is their own idea. So there is a chance that they might throw your referral out the window altogether and just do it their own way. And you've got to be okay with that too. Mm-hmm. You also, though, if that's the case and it's not a situation where you're talking to that therapist and they're not able to self-correct, you may need to end the coaching relationship until they can come back and have worked through those issues. We're not saying that you have to 100% end the coaching relationship every time. There are ways for you to continue coaching, but you have to be remaining in the coaching space and they have to be working on the therapy things in another space. And that has to just be very important and be discussed. Did I forget anything? No, I had my matcha kicked in, so I'm all right. Good. I think we're at final thoughts, y'all.
I think there's so much to uncover with this. I love how Brene Brown really identifies the difference between the two. So definitely read her stuff.
I will post a great YouTube video. I love when she talks about how creativity, vulnerability.
Oh, you got me.
All of that good stuff is born out of shame, and how you have to study shame in order to understand all of these other very powerful and forward-moving emotions. And I think it made me cry. I got a tear in my eye. I was like, oh, love it. So I will post that video right now. Sorry, Jerome, go ahead.
No, you took the words. I mean, I think really what we're leading into is saying you guys should go watch Brene Brown's TED Talk after this if you have time. Yeah, we watched it.
It's a good one.
A good handful of us have. I think all of us probably watched it. Then it sounds like. So yeah, she does go in really deep and uncovers a lot with it. And I don't think explicitly talked about vulnerability, but that is something that I think is huge when it comes to getting past your shame and guilt. It's something that you have to get in a vulnerable space to because you are facing that shame and that guilt. And I think in a coaching session, that is the space of vulnerability for you. Another great reason as to why you should think about coaching if you haven't started coaching yet.
You know what I just realized in this conversation? I sometimes feel guilty if I talk too much, especially if I think that Jerome didn't get enough airtime.
You shouldn't. You guys are always great.
I had my hand raised.
Oh, sorry. There's a pop-up. I have like a little pop-up. I couldn't see it.
Never feel guilty for talking too much, because I would rather have us all talking way too much getting in arguments, speaking over one another,
Okay.
than to have us have dead air time.
Yeah, if I've got something I really want to say, I'll speak really loud and let
Yes,
you guys
and
know.
exactly. And Jerome gets a look in his eye, and I'm like, "Hey, Jerome, I know you want to say
Yeah,
something."
Brooke catches it really well
I
too.
try to
Yeah.
swoop him in whenever I can.
Okay. That's so funny.
The one thing I'm doing is always looking at you guys and trying to see if one of you wants to speak.
Like a little signal. Everyone has a little signal.
Don't feel guilty, Jen. Please don't. Do you have any? Is that it for your final thoughts?
I think sometimes clients can have some guilt and shame that comes up around their goals because they're chasing and going after their dreams and big things. And I think that's something to look out for. And we didn't even touch on that, but I did want to mention that's definitely something to look out for. Is it going to knock them back down into their comfortable thermostat setting?
Which is interesting because it's like feeling guilty for good things, right? Like feeling guilty for, which is to me, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't feel guilty for wanting good things for ourselves. But I can see how that could come up for sure. I'll have to have a future topic about that. Lisa, did you give your final thoughts? I think you did. Yeah, just making sure. I didn't want to skip anybody. My final thoughts, this is something Brene Brown said, and I think it is super powerful. She said that secrecy, silence, and judgment are what feeds shame. And it makes me want to cry just saying it. Because like I think about so many situations where people are ashamed of just who they are as human beings, and they keep it in, and they feel judged, and they and for me, it's why things like pride and things like that are so important, because it gets people to stop hiding who they are and come out and just be honest. And in that way, Jen, in the same way people are ashamed of their goals and they're keeping them secret, and that shouldn't happen. Like, we should all fly our freak flags fly our freak flags high. We should all be willing to put our dreams out there. We have one life, and not be scared or ashamed or feel judged just for wanting to be human and do good things and just live life. And it breaks my heart when I think of anybody who is stuck living in shame, especially just for whatever it is good that they want in the world. So get out there and find empathy. Do the opposite. Even if it feels uncomfortable, share who you are, share your dreams, share it all. Don't be silent about it. And I think that that's true of so many things that we've talked about. Is when we talk about self-sabotage, it's a silence that's happening, an internal struggle. And that is often fed by just not talking to other people and isolation. And so it takes a lot of courage, but the first amazing step could be as simple as just talking about it.
Opening up, finding someone you trust.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to do that and go, okay, they might judge me, they might, but sometimes it's enough just to get it out, and you'll be surprised, I think, a lot of times at how willing people are to support you, especially if you're surrounded by good people. And that's what I do sometimes take that for granted. We're surrounded by awesome people who want to be better human beings all day long, right? Like, that's my life. And so I forget that there are less supportive human beings out there.
Yeah.
And I wish the whole world had the level of support that we have amongst the coaches and people in the business. So, and that is all. So
make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share this with someone who you think's been a little too hard on themselves lately, so they can help themselves out a bit. Make sure you guys join us. Wait, no, let's deliver. Are we doing next week? Lisa's asking in the okay.
We are. Yeah, I think we are. Are we? I think we're still going to try to do it.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure we are.
We're doing it.
So next week's topic is we're gonna delve into perfectionism and overachievers. I am right here an overachiever to the nth degree, that constantly working on that, which I think I'm a reformed overachiever. I've gotten better. So we'll be discussing this very sneakily, somewhat positive sounding form of self-sabotage. So And that is all.
Make sure you take our classes if you haven't taken our classes. Certified in 3 days.
Or at least check us out on Certified Life Coaching.
And we're award winning. It's pretty awesome. So, thank you for tuning in. And make sure you subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. So,
See you guys.
bye.